Awesome. We are there. So my name is Santiago Bernhardt, and I'm here to talk about infrastructure, and infrastructure in the way of how do we assure that infrastructure gets deployed. And I'm going to talk about release trains in a way that I want everybody to think on pipelines by thinking on trains. And why? Start thinking on the trains that they carry a lot of things. They can carry goods, people, they can skip things like steps if they need, and everything. Before I move forward, I want to ask everybody a question. Please, people that is technical, DevOps, SecOps, security teams, please stand up for a second. I want to see what is in the audience, and depending on that, I'm going to manage the rest of the presentation. So if you are technical, please stand up for just 1 minute. Thank you. And now everybody's waking up, and I promise that it's going to be very short. So yes, thank you. Please be seated. So why trains, right? I do like trains. Trains are very reliable. They run all the time. Controversial. I know, except the Wellington trains. But think on trains from the concept point of view, or what a train means is getting from a place to another, and if it runs, it should get there. Trains are capable of carrying a lot of stuff and doing a lot of things on one go. Except Wellington trains, of course. So if there is anybody from the mid-link, I apologize. So talking pipeline trains, I always try to bring people back into what a train really means and what a pipeline really means. And it's about running things either like if it needs to be scheduled or if it needs to be on demand. Doing one or a lot of things in every run. Handle events no matter what is happening, or skipping things if things need to be skipped. When you want to build a pipeline, any kind of pipeline for deploying infrastructure, just a code, or automating something, think on all the moving parts. Think that sometimes you will have non-moving parts, and I'm going to get there, or a lot of things that will happen in that run. You can build an environment from the ground. You can modify a tiny bit of the environment. You can add a service, remove a service, or upgrade a new version of something. Just run it to perform a drift check. I don't know if you're familiar with drift checks. Drift checking is making sure that what we intend to deploy is actually being deployed in the background or is set in that particular state in the endpoint. And I'm going to be talking about this concept very briefly, because building full environments can mean anything. And it can be about how many things you want to carry with you for that particular environment. An environment for a business can mean something from 2 or 3 microservices to a very complex setup with many, many things like multiple databases, multiple endpoints, multiple regions, and so on. We've all been talking about this for the entire conference. But the key part is to always talk about how do you architect, how do you do your parallelism of your CIs, how do you reuse your workflows. The idea is that pipelines are meant for collaboration. That people actually think on their peer teams and everybody else in the organization, and they think, okay, if I'm building this, how everybody else can benefit from this, a slight modification or a slight feature that I'm using. I'm a person that comes from a weird background. I have been a platform person for many years, doing on-prem work like 15 years ago. I have done security work. I have done network work. I have done DevOps. I'm currently doing site reliability, and I'm always consulting from different places. I come in to help them either build a full environment from the ground, an MVP, and get it to launch, or come in and help a big business that already has a massive plan and get them to actually comply and get to launch and get there. When I talk about pipelines to all of these type of customers, I talk about define your expectations. And I always give these basic examples. And I say, what you want this pipeline to do is to create and manage your projects and environments, to roll back when something fails or to ignore it, to remediate if there is a problem in your cloud or in your non-cloud configuration. But this one is the key part, is I always tell them your pipelines should verify everything every time they run. And what does this mean? And I'm going to get in more detail probably later. Is if you want to build an environment that consists in something simple like a VPC or a VNet with a bunch of services on top of it, a database and a cluster for some queuing, and regardless of the amount of microservices, is make your pipeline in a way that it will always check all the moving parts, including your networks, your monitoring, your organizational settings, all the bits and pieces. Notify if there is drift. I always talk about drift. And why? Because we live in this environment where people gives access to different levels of development teams and developers to try things. And what happens is what is in the code is not what is actually being deployed. And when the pipelines run, they clash and they get out of sync. This is kind of like the non-technical bit. It always translates to, again, getting things done. Reinforcing the configuration states is you want your pipeline to make sure that what you want to happen, it actually happens. If you are deploying something and it fails halfway through, it should have a fallback mechanism so it actually can go back to a previous step. Running things without making changes, and this is what takes everybody. And they're like, why? Why would I run my pipelines if they're not making changes? Just run them for assurance. They will make sure that nothing needs to be changed. This one, the screaming of mismatch, is talking about drift and alerts on everything if there is a difference of your intentions. And let's talk about this little fella there. And utopian consistency. This is something I always find interesting everywhere. When I tell them your pipelines should get you to your desired state, they're like, oh, that is really hard. We have like so many teams that they're doing all these moving parts and we are there. But they never define what is their desired state. They never talk about meeting expectations. And I try to reinforce your pipeline should meet your expectations every time. The most important part is what you want it to happen, it should happen. And in the business side of things, for the non-technical audience is, if you read them, you will have an easier environment to work with. You will have, clearly better development teams, better security teams, happy security nerds, the incident resolution part of it. Think about the transparency of having a good pipeline that actually, if something has been changed, you know why it changed, and you can actually remediate. Talking about up-to-date infrastructure, that applies not just to containers or VMs, that applies to anything, even like just building and testing and doing some linting, is how you consistently check all your projects. It can be, 700 serverless repositories. How do you randomly scan all of them at deployment time so you make sure that they have the up-to-date dependencies before they get released? And talking about compliance and auditability or auditing standards, I'm super passionate about compliance and getting companies up and running. And I think that everybody forgets that if you start with the right foot, you can get there super easily. Everybody starts talking about compliance when they are like well embedded into drama. Just take a step back, think about compliance all the time and put it in your pipelines. So, my idea was on this journey to keep everybody on the ground of like trains and how a pipeline should work. What I would like to actually hear from you, from the audience, is what do you think about your existing setups and if they actually look anything like a train or they actually run more on the flavor of like, okay, we do what we can, what we did in the past, and we are maintaining and trying to evolve different forms. If there are no questions, it's also understood. Don't feel any pressures, and thank you for smiling.